Welcome back, everybody, to the newest episode of the penpodcast.com. I'm your host, Matthew Harms, founder of Pen for Hire, where we offer premier ghostwriting and author coaching services. Also, the creators of the Pen Podcast, where we sit with authors, writers, writing industry professionals, subject matter experts, and all around interesting and today funny people. I have a very special guest for us, Mr. Jeff Wozer. How are you today, Jeff?
I'm doing outstanding, Matt. Thank you for inviting me.
It is my pleasure
to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. I mean, not that I don't love all my guests, but I think someone with a resume like yours, if we can't have some fun today, I'm in trouble.
Well, we'll give it a go.
If you'd be so kind, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, from among many titles, I'm a comedian, I'm a speaker, and I'm a writer. And right now I'm leaning more towards the speaking side of those three titles. And I go around the country talking about digital balance, trying to get people off their screens and more present, more in the moment, more productive. And that all started from my writing, where all of a sudden I became from being on the screen, and all of a sudden I conditioned myself to become distracted by online distractions to the extent I now have difficulty focusing, especially when it comes to writing, and it pisses me off. So that's why I got into speaking about digital balance.
All right. So yeah, we're definitely going to spend some time on that and unfortunately my kids are in school, but if you could talk to my 6-year-old, that would be wonderful about his screen time balance.
Sure.
They think these passcodes, like for your time limit, just means come bother me every hour to get a new passcode. No, you're supposed to put the price down.
Exactly.
So you said this all started with your writing. Talk to me a little bit about that. Where did your writing career start?
Well, I was out west, and I was started to do stand-up comedy, and basically, as a comedian, you have a 1-hour workday, and depending on the venue, you might have to promote it on radio or TV, but otherwise, you have the whole day free. And time is the only benefit you have. Anyone in the performing arts, writers, whatever. And since time is the only benefit, I'm like, man, I might as well put this to use. So I began freelance writing for magazines, and mainly outdoors. I was doing humor articles, and it was a perfect marriage for me because I'm heavily into the outdoors. Obviously, I was a comedian, so this was awesome. So I began freelance writing for these different magazines, and like, man, this is great. I could tour, I could write from anywhere, never have to check into an office. But then I got greedy. All of a sudden it's like, because when the internet was taking off, everyone's like, online is king, or content is king, rather. So I was like, I might as well start writing for online companies, and suddenly, kaboom. I had clients all over the world. I was, ghostwriting for a celebrity doctor in Australia. I was writing bike tour descriptions for a company in France. I was writing humor scripts for a production company in India. And it was awesome. The money was fantastic, but suddenly I was spending more and more and more time on the screen. And I was still touring, but it was like I was going like 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week on the screen. And I remember my girlfriend at the time was like, man, it's going to get you. You're going to get hooked. I'm like, there's no way. And then all of a sudden one day I missed a writing deadline. Never had that problem before. Then I missed another deadline and another deadline. And I couldn't figure it out until all of a sudden I realized I no longer had the mental stamina needed for deep thought for writing. And that's where I pinpointed it back to the internet. Because I read this article, it was in the cover story in the Atlantic. Nicholas Carr, he actually wrote a book on this. He wrote the cover story for Atlantic. It's called Is Google Making Us Stupid? And in it, he talked about other writers he knows that can no longer write because they lack the mental capacity to focus for writing. And that's so it's like, oh my gosh, that's what happened to me.
Right, so I want to dive into that a little deeper because, as most of us in this day and age, I'm going to exclude myself from this only for one reason, because I happen to be archaic. And if you'll notice, there's a pencil in my hand. I still do most of my writing on paper. However, unfortunately, my clients work not so much because we've got to work, in the cloud and they have to see and review. So
Sure.
there's a degree of screen time there. But with my coaching clients, if they have to write on a computer, I always try to tell them, turn off your internet, turn off your phone, eliminate those distractions, because the screen itself isn't necessarily the evil in in what you're talking about, is it? Or it's everything that comes with the screen?
It's everything that comes with the screen. I mean, it's crazy, the studies. The Air Force Academy did a study. They put 3 groups of people in 3 different rooms. One room had computers with access, another room had computers without access, and the other had no computers. They're then given taught a lesson, and then they were tested how well they retained the information. Not surprisingly, the group without the computers scored the highest. But what surprised them was the group that had computers without access scored just as poorly as the group that had computers with access. So it's like our devices are like secondhand smoke. They do not even have to be on to be distracting us. Basically what you just said.
And that you've just made me think about a level that I've just always assumed turn off the internet and you're safe, but it sounds like that's not actually the case. And you know what? Now I'm doing some self-actualization here. I guess there are 75 other things on my computer that can distract me, if not the internet, right? I can jump to my screenwriting software. I can jump over here to my calendar. I can find any number of things to take my eye off what I'm supposed to be doing.
It's exactly. There's another study, just to kind of beat this to the ground. The Kaspersky Lab did a study where they put 4 people in 4 different scenarios. It's a cybersecurity firm out of Germany. They put a person at a desk with their phone on the desk, a person at the desk with a phone in a drawer, the person at a desk with a phone across the room, and a person at the desk with a phone outside the room. They were then given lessons, then tested how well they retained the information. The farther away the phone, the higher the retention score. It was a 26% difference with the phone out of the room and the phone on top of the desk. So it's just in the presence. It's tempting in itself.
Oh my God, I love that you shared that, because I've actually had coaching clients where I've told them, where's your writing space? Oh, it's in my loft. Where is that in your house? And then I'll specifically tell them, okay, what's the furthest point away from there? That's where I want you to leave your phone. Don't just turn the internet off. Like, leave your phone as far. So you have to make a serious conscious effort to say, I am walking away from writing now and I'm going to go find my phone.
Exactly. Because all you're trying to do is build some resistance, because we're so we're so conditioned now to compulsively just grab our phones. We see it, I'll just check. We always tell ourselves, oh, it's just going to be a quick check. And again, another study, Gloria Mark, professor of informatics out of UC California, Irvine, found out once we are distracted, it takes us 23 minutes, 15 seconds on average to regain full focus. So if you're just checking, oh, it's just a 5-minute check, that's like a 30-minute break.
I've heard almost the exact same statistic, and it is so true. Our mind doesn't take into account all of the ramping back up and getting out of that flow state. That just that simple check of the text message, because now, but while I'm here, there's an email bubble. Let me check what that email is. And then next thing you know, your social media is going on. So it's not even the 23 minutes to get back. That 1-minute check can become a 10 or 15-minute distraction plus the 23 minutes.
Exactly. And that's just it. It's like a residue, because once you get back, it's like, oh, I just responded to this email, but you're thinking about that and it carries residue over. So that's what takes it. So, I mean, what you said, that's just it. Someone might just text, dude, what time we leave, give me some tips or something. It took them, 20 seconds to write that text. It may take you 20 minutes to respond to that text, or they send you a link, or that's like my problem. All of a sudden, you go down that link, and the next thing you're web surfing. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's almost like a riptide. It's like, oh my God, don't go out in the ocean because it'll pull you out. That's what the internet is. It's like, oh, I'm good. I could pull away, but no, it pulls us out farther and farther away from our focus.
And if you're like me, you'll try to trick yourself. I'm like, well, I'm just going to write. I'm going to do all this later, right? So I'll take the distraction and I'm writing to-do notes. Next thing you know, it's an hour later. I have 42 things to do that weren't on my list before I started going down that rabbit hole. And it's like, do I really need to do any of those 42 things if they weren't there when I woke up this morning?
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. I speak about this, and I actually put it on. I think it was last year or something. I put on my to-do list was finish an article for this magazine outside Bozeman up in Montana. That's all my to-do list was. At the end of the day, I was so frustrated. I made things I did not intend to do that day. And I had, like, and I wrote, it's like, I watched a video about a black bear attacking an inflatable Christmas ornament. I read on Facebook some college friend that, ate at Applebee's and he did not like the garlicky green beans. Just all this crap that I had no intention of doing. And that's the problem. We focus on the unimportant at the expense of the important.
I would love your input on this from a distraction standpoint. And even if more of what your specialty is in screens, I think what I found, even in the example I just gave, we tend to try to trick ourselves as humans into thinking we're being productive, right? So if I've got 42 things here on my list and I took off 41 of them, but the only one I didn't do was the one that I really needed to do, what did I accomplish for the day?
Exactly. I think that's what the internet, with the internet, we confuse looking busy for being productive. It's like, oh, I'm on my screen, so I'm looking, I'm productive, but you're not getting the important stuff done.
I used to joke when I had a corporate job that, just because you're at your desk for 8 hours a day, right? Like with this whole silent quitting and the great resignation, everyone's like, oh, well, if you're not at work, how do I know you're working? When I was at work, you didn't know I was working. I was just sitting in front of my computer. You had no idea what I was doing for 8 hours.
Exactly. And it just keeps on getting worse and worse because we're society keeps on getting more and more ingrained to our screens. And I'm not, and I just want to clarify, I should have said, I'm not anti-tech. We could all agree it's absolutely amazing. But that is the problem. It's too amazing. We can't take our eyes off our screens. With
great power comes great responsibility. I don't think anyone would argue that the evolution of the automobile is a bad thing. Is it bad, though, that, a reckless driver now has the ability to go 167 miles an hour in a 25 mile an hour speed zone thanks to the engine in the BMW? Yeah, that's probably not so good. But do we undo all of the technology to prevent that? No, we just have to get better at mitigating the what should have been foreseen, but unforeseen consequences of our advancements.
Exactly. But the problem is with that, it's not tech. I think it's how fast it's coming at us. Because if you look at like the agrarian age, that lasted 3,000 years, the Industrial Revolution, 300 years, the information age, which I think is ironic because it's not the knowledge age, the information age with our computers lasted 30 years. Now we're at AI where it's changing almost daily. And so it's almost like an invasive species. Like we can't process. We don't have time to adapt. It's just coming at us so fast. And that's what's making it so difficult for us.
And I like how you said information, not knowledge, because I would hazard to say not all information is good or needed.
No, and that's just it. There's such a glut of crap and conspiracies and lies and everything. And yeah, we're not getting smarter.
If I'm writing a book on sales performance, I don't need 10,000 pages of information on cat videos.
No, but that's exactly, we gravitate towards that. Yeah.
So I want to jump quickly back to your comedy. So I would imagine there's a degree of writing needed when you're preparing your stand-up, correct?
Yeah. And when I first started stand-up, that's, the internet was just taking off. And so I was extremely disciplined where I would write 5 hours a day. Every day. It was always longhand. I still do that in longhand and in composition notebooks. And it was wonderful. But then then when I started to do more writing, that's when computers were taking off. And that's when I started to, write prose, screenplays and articles on the screen. And I try to do what you do and write in longhand, but I just struggle with that now.
Interesting. And do you think that's because of the getting so accustomed to screens and being able to type, or?
I think it's a combination of both. And again, it's that kind of, before I used to be able to focus for hours, no problem. Now I'm lucky if I go with 10, 15 minutes. It's almost like reading. I'm kind of getting off tangent here. I used to be book monogamous. Now it's like I'm this book infidel. I'll go upstairs and have, like a 3-page read with Hemingway. Then I come downstairs and have a quickie and 4-page quickie with Malcolm Gladwell in the kitchen. And then I go into my, desk room and all of a sudden, I'm with Thomas McGuane, having a fling with him. And it drives me nuts.
Keeping the books in separate rooms so they don't know about each other.
Right. And so I've done this book info and having all these affairs. I never had this problem before. And I just counted earlier, I had 7 books open. I never had that problem. And before I just, read one book, but it's kind of that same thing. I'll start reading now and all of a sudden, within 2 pages, like, I should go online. I should put the book down. And I don't have to go online, but I'm so conditioned for that. And that's kind of when it comes to writing. If I'm writing longhand now, it really takes me, I really have to nail myself to that desk to really focus, where also I'm like, I should go on. I'll use a thesaurus, or, I'll convince myself, you dupe yourself. I just got to go online, check a stat or something. And again, we fall down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. In fact, for me, I know there was a point where I got away from writing longhand because I started feeling like it was double the effort, right? I have to write it, but at some point I've still got to get it onto a screen because no one's going to ever read what I've written in my notebook. Like, that's just
Sure.
I can't deliver work to a client like that. I can't deliver it to a publisher like that. So I've tried to find hacks to use technology to my advantage. And what I'll do now is when I sit down to write longhand, I will have a bunch of things that I want to write about. I try not to, kind of like the reading infidel, I try not to lock myself into, well, I've got to work on this project, because sometimes you sit down and it's just not there, right? So I want to have at least 2 or 3 things that are, and not just fake things, but things that really do need to get done, and see which one strikes me. And then once they're written, I'll use the speak to talk on my Google Doc to transcribe it, so I'm not sitting there painstakingly typing it by fingers. And for me, that hack has kind of worked to make me more productive.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I never thought of doing that.
Happy to help. It's just sometimes our worst enemy is ourselves. We have to figure out how to beat ourselves.
Exactly. I'm curious with that. I've been experimenting with blocking apps. Have you tried those?
What kind of apps?
Blocking.
To block like notifications and things.
I have a thing called Freedom, and if you want to check it out, Freedom. There's another one called Forest. But what Freedom does, I could program, 6 hours, 7 hours, 7 minutes, whatever, of just blocking the entire internet. And I could program it also where the only thing I could access is a thesaurus.com if I'm writing. And it's great because if you do try to inadvertently like check email or something, else it'll give you the screen where it says, do what matters. You're free. Do what matters. So they give you this great little reminder. But it's the only way I could actually write online now.
Interesting. I'm going to look into that. What I've done is I've definitely taken off all the social media apps from my phone. All the notifications are off. In fact, I don't even touch my accounts. My assistant manages them, because I know I hate social media with a passion. I also know, unfortunately, it's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that's quick or easy, right? I've got to respond to that one message. It's a client, so I'm going to go into my Facebook. 3 hours and umpteen videos and rampant political posts later. It's like my brain is mush, and I just don't want to do anything.
It's maddening, isn't it? It's absolutely maddening. And then you just, at the end of the day, you're so frustrated, and it's like, it's like, and then you wake up and, it happens all over again. That's what's so frustrating. We know it. We know how addictive. We know how this pulls us in, yet we still struggle with it.
Yeah, humans.
There's this great, she's a professor at USC, named Wendy Wood. She also, she's the author of the book, Good Habits, Bad Habits. And what she said, willpower is not going to do it. So we have to alter the cue. And so again, it's kind of going back to what I said earlier, we were talking about, get the phone out of the room, or, like a classic one. Everyone uses their phone for an alarm clock now. And it's like, okay, they pick up their phone. That's the cue to go online. 30 seconds into their day, they're checking email, they're checking, text, they're checking social media. They're being reactive rather than proactive. And it's like, man, take that cue away. Just go back to an old-fashioned alarm clock. So we got to alter the cue, and that is keep our devices away from us, or, write longhand or do something.
So you just made me think about something I bought a while back that was incredibly helpful, and it's been sitting on the back of my desk collecting dust because I've gotten out of the habit of using it. But the Pomodoro timer,
Ah, yeah.
I mean,
Everyone talks about that.
25, it's really not a joke, Jeff. 25 minutes, you start this timer, the amount of work I would get done and like productive stuff in 25 minutes and then take that 5-minute reset was incredible. And it didn't, this thing does nothing else other than the time blocks. There's no internet. It just lets me know when my 25 minutes is up. And it's so much better than the phone alarm clock. Because sometimes when that thing beeps, it's not even your alarm clock. It's only been 10 minutes and not 20. It's a text message. Oops, I forgot to turn that off. Now I'm done.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, oh, once you cave in, that's it. You can't come. Why'd you stop using it?
Much like most things, I consciously don't know. I guess I fell out of the habit one time, made the mistake of bringing my phone back into the office and leaving it not just, it's still right here. As we started, right before we started recording, it went off. And that's not supposed to be the case. It's supposed to be upstairs in the kitchen, far out of my reach, where I have to make a conscious effort to walk up a flight of stairs to get it. But
sure.
You could probably speak to this way more than I have. It seems like reading all the books on habits, but doesn't it take infinitely longer to create a good habit than it does to break one?
Yes. I don't have the exact figure, but yes. I mean, I've heard various things, from 6 weeks to create a habit to, 300 days but yeah. Oh, it does.
It only takes about 10 minutes to break a good one.
Yeah, it does. And then the guilt comes in and it's like, oh man.
And then you lie to yourself, like, I'm going to get back to it tomorrow. And no, it takes like an aha moment like this for me to say, where was that timer? It's been sitting here the whole time and I can't remember the last time I've used it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I talk about this when I speak, I talk about this quote by writer Jay Brown, where he talks about, don't say you don't have enough time. We have the exact same amount of time as, Michelangelo, as Da Vinci, as Einstein, Mother Teresa, all these human exclamation points. And I remember when I first saw them, like, oh my gosh, he's right. What am I complaining that I don't have time? But then when I said, it's like, what do these 7 people have, these people have in common besides being dead? They did not have internet distractions. And I'm sorry, in all due respect, if they had the same distractions we had, because, like Michelangelo would be online, texting like, dude, what was I thinking, taking this lame ceiling job? # Sistine Chapel sucks. They would have been doing the same crap we're doing.
Right, posting pictures like on Instagram of, here's the foot is done.
Yeah, exactly. They're Thomas Jefferson. He would have been playing, he would have been playing Grand Theft Horse Buggy the whole time. He wouldn't have been doing all that stuff, But so I'm just like, man, in all due respect, there's no way. I was reading something the other day, the writer Hunter S. Thompson. I was always a big fan of his style, and it just, but they were saying, he said there's no way he could have written on a computer because it was just that. And I thought it was interesting what he said, because you could just self-edit continuously, where you're trying to perfect the sentence. And that's what I have. That's my problem, as compared to writing, on a typewriter, which he was accustomed to doing. It's like, man, I got to get the sentence right the first time. Whereas with our computers now, it's like, oh my God, just constantly rewriting, trying to get that perfect sentence.
That is, again, something I coach to. And my hack, like, if you have to write on a computer, I tell people, turn off your spell check. Make it so that red squiggly line doesn't show up, because that is like a writer's kryptonite. It's going to sit here no matter how much you tell yourself, I'm not going to go back and edit it. It's sitting there in the back of your brain laying eggs. Like, there's a misspelling in word 3. And you just can't physically concentrate going forward without going back. Even if you don't go back, it's still weighing on you.
Sure. That's great advice. It's kind of like, did you ever read Julia Cameron's Morning Pages?
No.
Oh, I can't think of the, oh man, it's a classic book, but she talks about creative morning pages, where you just write longhand and you write 3 pages nonstop. And I cannot believe the stuff that just comes out without having that self-edit button in your brain. And it's just like, oh my God, I wish I could do this all the time.
For the
It's
first
brilliant
time,
practice.
I only use this as an example, not to plug myself, because I was shocked. My last book I wrote probably in 2019 or 2020. And since that point, I had been lamenting to anyone who would listen that I haven't written anything for myself in 2-3 years, right? I've done I think I've helped maybe 24 people get their books out in that time frame. I've written close to 1 million words, just none were for me. And finally I said, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I need to take my own advice. So I took the technology out of my hand. I made my assistant put writing time on my calendar and block it. Not allow any clients to take the time. And whenever those notifications would come up, so, at 11 o'clock, I'm writing for an hour, I would take my notebook and I would go sit in my backyard. Thankfully, it was just the summer, because here in New York, you can't really do this in the winter. And I finished my new book in 6 weeks.
Wow. Fascinating.
Strictly by blocking the time and writing. I think I wrote 75% of it longhand, and then just spoke it into Google and had my editor clean it.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's, are you still doing that?
So now we're going to pick on me. So I gave myself the accolade. Once again, now that it was done, it was like, the end. Here you go, editor, take it. And I've gone back to I don't know what the last thing I've written for myself is. Now it's kind of that honeymoon phase of, well, the book's done. I still got to get it out there. And no, I should have taken that momentum and just applied it to my next project, or whether maybe that's not a book, maybe that's a screenplay. I've got a list of ideas of movies that I want to write. I've got a list of ideas of blog topics, of LinkedIn posts. I have no shortage of ideas. I'm the king of, rather than writing the ideas, just coming up with more ideas.
Sure. So you're just drowning in this sea of ideas, and it's, I mean, how you're describing it, it's almost, I remember when I had a dog and it died, everyone's like, oh, you got to get a new dog right away. And it's almost like with a book, it's almost like you finish it. It's almost like, man, you jump into your next project, let your brain kind of recalibrate, but jump right in, or else, because it's so difficult to get back into that groove, that mindset that's required for writing.
Yeah, I had a business coach who the way he put it made perfect sense to me. And I try to remind myself of this all the time. Too many times we're drowning in opportunity, right? I've got these 75 things I could do, but which one's the most impactful? Which one do I want to do the most? Which one do I need to do, right? If you're a client and I promised you something by Friday, and I haven't started it yet, that's probably the opportunity I should be working on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Well, I'm reading some book that someone recommended me, the 20-80 principle. Have you heard that?
The Pareto principle. Yep.
Yeah. Or 20% of what you focus, gives you 80% results. And that's what you got to focus on.
Yep. Absolutely. So you know what? You mentioned something earlier, and I meant to come back to it, but this is just conversation's been amazing, and I'm losing track of time. You mentioned writing for your stand-up like 5 hours a day. How much writing, or I know this might not be easy to quantify, but for, let's say you're doing an hour stand-up, how much time does it actually take behind the scenes to write 1 hour's worth of stand-up material?
Wow. It's, I remember talking with Richard, the late Richard Jenny. I don't know if you remember him, great comedian, but he was saying, 99% of what we write is just trash. So it's only 1%. And, because you don't know what's funny. I mean, because you're just in the audience of one. You think after doing it, it's like, okay, I think this is going to work. And then you do it on stage and it's like, oh my God, it just bombed. But then a lot of times, after doing it, you kind of tinker with it and all that. Then you find it after the 5th or 6th time, you worked on that joke and it works. And it's like, man, I had it the first time, but you didn't deliver with confidence. Because it's the first time you're saying it on stage and all that. So there's just a lot of tinkering involved, but man, I really can't, because some people are just, they could write and no problem. And then they're very good at acting on stage, where I was very, I was very, it had to be precise. I had to each joke precise, and I wasn't really improvising on stage. It was okay, I have this written, this written, this written. So that I really had to work on my jokes. So I would say, man, for me, it probably took me a couple of years to get an hour.
Okay. So, I mean, that for anyone who thinks comedy is easy, that just completely turns that thought on its head.
I mean, because you have to understand all, and, you're writing for yourself, and all of a sudden you got to make this joke work for every demographic. It's people from all, different ages, different demographics. And it's like, man, it's got to connect.
Man, that is such an eye-opening comment, because it's the exact opposite. Well, maybe not the exact opposite, but when you're writing a book or you're writing an article, you're not writing it for everyone, right? You can't physically write a book for everyone.
Sure.
If you're writing a self-help book, you're writing a book for people who need help in that particular department. It's not going to resonate. A diet book's not going to resonate with Mr. Olympia.
No.
You've got to figure out exactly who your audience is. Whereas in comedy, you don't know who's going to be sitting there in front of you that night.
It's no, and that's how somehow you've got to make it universal. And there's, and some comics could do it just by delivery alone, just their stage presence. But others were very word driven, which was my case. It's like, man, it's got to, and unlike writing, it might take weeks, if not months, to get feedback. With comedy, you're getting instant feedback. So,
which in a way, I guess, is kind of good, because at least you'll know immediately, like, all right, this isn't working, I got to switch gears. You can spend months writing a book, put it out there, only to find out, wow, everyone hates it. I just wasted 6 months of my life.
Exactly. You're right about that. And so, you got to make this instant. It's almost like when you're up there, it's like a Rolodex. It's just spinning in your head, where it's like, okay, that's working. This is not working. Go to this one. Or, so it's a different dynamic for writing, just jokes.
I don't think I could handle it. I think I would be like, wait, are they quiet because they're waiting for the next line to laugh, or are they quiet because I've lost them?
You get used to it. I mean, it's interesting, because once you get established, I think, it's like, oh, you get nervous, and it's like, not really, until you're doing open mic night, where, because all of a sudden the expectations were, okay, this is an established comic, he's going to make us laugh, but then you're feeling the pressure, and it's like, man, I'm doing new stuff, and I don't know if it's going to, and that's when you get nervous, is doing that new stuff.
And you've been on stage with some pretty well-known comedians, right?
Martin Short, Dave Chappelle, John Oliver, pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine going to like a chapter reading with and following or Ernest Hemingway in the same room, right? It's kind of like, what am I doing here? I can't imagine if I'm a comedian being on stage with Dave Chappelle.
You just realize after you're sitting in the green room, it's like, man, they're no different than anyone else, And I think that's what kind of levels the field out. It's like, man, we're just talking about, life. We're just talking about, playing tennis or, whatever. And it just, so you really don't feel it that way.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for saying that, because I think, especially, I mean, no matter what it is, whether it's sports, my kids play a lot of youth sports, writing, NASCAR racing, I think we have a tendency to put the most well-known people on this pedestal and think like, there's no way I can compete with them, but you don't have to, right? You have to compete with yourself, because some of the funniest comedians I've ever heard of do stand-up were in a very small hole-in-the-wall comedy club, and no one's ever heard their name, because being good and being known are not the same.
No, they're not. And you have to understand with comedy also, it's like Seinfeld says, we all suck when we first start as comedians. No one just goes on stage, at the start and, oh my God, they're good. It's a craft, no different than writing. And you just develop it. You develop this persona, or you develop your writing style or your angle, your voice. But we're all rooting for each other. It's like if I'm on the ticket with two other comics, I don't know, with, Dave Chappelle or something, he wants the person in front of him to do well. So you're kind of rooting. We're all part of the same package. But then when you're in the back of the room, just talk that. I mean, like I said, that just levels it. It's like, man, they're just like you or I. They've got the same problems, the same fears, the same insecurities.
Oh my goodness, this has been so. We could probably keep going, but I just realized we're actually already overtime. Wow, I am motivated. So, Jeff, I know you have an event coming up. So please, one, tell people where they can find you, your website, social media, any of the best ways to follow you, and let them know about your upcoming event in Syracuse, and maybe even what you refer to Syracuse as. I love that acronym.
Well, they can find me at jeffwozer.com. And I have a lot of tips for, on digital distraction. I'm always posting that, new videos. So they can find me there. I'm really not big on, kind of like you, social media, but out of necessity for marketing. I'm kind of on Facebook. I'm more on LinkedIn. So they can find me there, Jeff Wozer. And then if anyone's in the Syracuse area, I'm doing a lot of speaking, but that's all private. But if anyone's in the Syracuse area, October 15th, Sunday night, I'm with Rocky Laporte. He's a great comedian. I'll be at the Funny Bone. It's a special one-night show on a Sunday night. I know the Bills are playing the Giants that night on Sunday Night Football, so that could be distracting. But it's in Syracuse, and if, as I was mentioning earlier, Syracuse, if you've ever been there, it's one of the cloudiest cities in the country, and I'm convinced it's an acronym that stands for snows year-round and clouds up seemingly every day.
And I mean, in New York, I didn't realize this up until recently, but it is actually the snow capital of the state. I always thought it was Buffalo, but it's not.
No, Syracuse is right up there, and yeah, they're challenging Buffalo pretty much every year for that title. So
fantastic. Well, anyone in the area or anyone who is close enough to travel to the area, we always recommend supporting our guests. Hopefully, you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Jeff, hopefully, if it wasn't a 4-hour ride, as I mentioned earlier, I would be there. But if you get anything downstate within about 2 hours of the city, I am there. I would love to see you in person. Head over to jeffwozer.com, and we will catch you all on the next episode of the Penn Podcast. Jeff, thank you once again so much for being here.
Matt, it was awesome. Thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed it.
It is my pleasure.